You, commander, have your own specified responsibilities in the air navigation order, to which you will need to answer if there is ever a court case affecting something that has happened whilst you have been in command. As we've already discussed, the commander shall write in the technical log. The commander shall not fly if the aircraft will contravene airdrome operating minima. Contravene airdrome operating minima. The commander shall be at the controls for takeoff and landing and shall ensure a pilot is at the controls at all times. The commander shall satisfy himself: 1. The flight can safely be made. 2. The necessary equipment is carried. 3. The aircraft is airworthy and not operated in contravention of the minimum equipment list. 4. The aircraft is loaded properly. 5. Sufficient fuel is carried. 6. The aircraft performance is okay. 7. The pre-flight checks are completed. 8. The passengers are briefed in accordance with the requirements. Just as a useful handful of responsibilities. But if you like, in balance to that, you have a very significant power as a commander that's bestowed upon you in law so that you can conduct the flight safely. So, every person shall obey all lawful commands which the commander may give to ensure the safety of flight. A person shall not act as a member of flight crew if he knows or suspects that his physical or mental condition renders him unfit. Flight crew shall keep a personal flying log. That's what the air navigation order says, ladies and gentlemen. A person shall not recklessly or negligently act in a manner likely to endanger aircraft. A person shall not recklessly or negligently permit an aircraft to endanger a personal property. A person shall not be drunk in an aircraft. A person shall not use words that are or behave in a threatening, abusive, insulting or disorderly manner towards a member of the crew of the aircraft, nor interfere with the crew's duties. A person shall not smoke when a no smoking notice is displayed on behalf of a commander. And flight begins when the aircraft moves under its own power and approach begins at 1,000 feet above airdrome elevation. Now, let's just expand a couple of those things, shall we? You, commander, are absolutely the authority when you give lawful commands to ensure the safe flight of aircraft. And although I'm going to come back to this a little bit later, it gives me a hook to hang on an aspect of crew resource management. Crew resource management is not about being nice to people. Crew resource management is about being effective team members, or maximising the team effort for the safe operation of aircraft. And of course, generally, that means creating the best possible atmosphere, working environment so everybody's getting along well. But nevertheless, there may be occasions when you, the commander, have to instruct people to do things for the safety of the aircraft. And that you must never be afraid to do. And I think back over a career of nearly 35 years, and as a commander of more than half of that time, I can think of less occasions than the fingers of one hand when I've had to instruct things to make them happen, to stay safe. But if you're required to do it, then that is what the law says. And the law says that people shall obey. In days of yore, when commanders said jump, people would say, "How high, sir?" Today, if you say jump, the chances are you'll have to explain why and say, "If you wouldn't mind, please." Such is a reflection of the change of society. The second point about being fit, both physically and mentally, is a very important one. If you are faced with a mutiny, let's say from the cabin crew, then that's the sort of occasion that immediately comes to mind that presents you with a huge difficulty. As we know, if we're going to Singapore, the rules on the extension of flying duty periods out of London don't apply. Whereas if we're going to Nairobi, they will be applied to the letter. And although that sounds disparaging, please take it in the context of what we are discussing here to try to illustrate a point. Only you, Commander, can decide whether to extend a duty day or reduce a rest period. And you will do that on the basis of that reduction or extension not affecting the safety of the flight. And there's a difference between a crew member saying to you, "I don't want to do it," or "my union won't allow it," or whatever, and somebody who says to you, "I am either physically or mentally unfit." Because on the one hand that's a company thing, and on the other hand that's a legal thing. And if it's a legal thing, that is a responsibility of every crew member, whether they are flight crew or cabin crew. So if somebody tells you they are physically or mentally unfit, then that's it. They're offloaded, or the aircraft's grounded, whatever. Okay. Yeah, you've got to keep a personal flying logbook. It doesn't matter what it's in, but you may well need to provide it, produce it, under certain circumstances, and you would be breaking the law if you could not. We talked about reckless and negligent. I can say that the definition of reckless or negligent that we discussed before will only ever be confirmed in a court of law, and will inevitably depend on the circumstances of the case, because it will be argued in court and subsequently a judgment will be made about whether an action was negligent or reckless or not. But a prudent captain might take along the definition that I've used in terms of negligence or recklessness. The recent addition to the air navigation order, which was all about air rage, that you can't use words or behave in a threatening behaviour, etc., or interfere with the crew's duties, gives you, the commander, a great deal of authority in relation to unruly behaviour in the aircraft. So when it is evident that a passenger is acting unreasonably or in an unruly manner or in a manner that endangers the aeroplane, he is breaking the law. He's breaking the law, and that means to say that you have quite a lot of power in dealing with that. Perhaps I should extend that a little bit further. Give you an example. Going down from Bangkok to Sydney one day, the CSD came up and said, "Well, Captain, we've got 4 people that are behaving unreasonably, they're drunk, we've now stopped serving drinks and they're getting abusive and they're upsetting passengers round about." Well, one, they contravened the first part of the air navigation order, they got drunk in the airplane. 2, they were contravening the air navigation order, they were saying they were being abusive and unruly and so on and so forth. So, as in the normal course of events, we gave them a warning letter, and I decided that because we had 3 crew, I would go down and I would read them the riot act. So I went down and I explained, calmed everything down, gave them the violation warning, and explained to them in words of one syllable that if any of this behaviour was repeated, we would be met in Sydney by the police. Did they understand that? Yes, they did. Well, that's what they said to me, and half an hour later, of course, they were being abusive again. So we were duly met by the police in Sydney, who, needless to say, took them off first, quite roughly. Secondly, they put them in jail in the airport. They, of course, we had gone through flying orders, and we had made sure that we had crossed every T and dotted every I. We got witness statements and so on and so forth. And although it took most of the morning on our arrival in Sydney to complete the witness statements, nevertheless, the result was satisfactory from many counts. 1, because I told them that this was going to happen, and it happened. 2, that the passengers saw, and I was able to explain to all of the passengers who couldn't see when we arrived in Sydney what had happened and what action had taken and what the consequences were. 3, that the crew felt good because they felt as though the process had been vindicated from their point of view, because they had, if you like, cabin crew had suffered the brunt of this abusive behaviour. And although the potential was that at some stage or other we were all going to have to go reconvene and go back to Sydney to be witnesses in court, of course it never happened, because the guys pleaded guilty and were substantially fined. A responsibility of the commander that will have to take on occasion in these sorts of circumstances. Well, I said at the outset I was going to bore you to death by the term standard operating procedures, and I can't talk about the role of commander without once again emphasising something that I believe should be, by now, absolutely self-evident. I have contracted, you have contracted with British Airways in order that you can take your salary home at the end of the month to operate their aircraft in accordance with British Airways standard operating procedures. We have said that standard operating procedures are contained in the operations manual. That's something you can touch. They're not things that are contained in flight crew newsletters. They're not contained in bits of junk written down. They are not contained in people's baggage. They are in the operations manual. And it is incumbent on you to know them, because ignorance of them is just no excuse, no defence. No defence. We've talked about a methodology of trying to keep them in random access memory. we have talked about the importance of being able to locate the information that isn't used day to day but needs to be found. We just talked about, for instance, an unruly passenger. Well, okay, I can think of immediately two parts of the operations manual that I can turn to support my understanding of what I need to do under those circumstances. And whilst I'm dealing with those sorts of things, I'll give the parts of the operations manual to my colleague to make a list of the things that we need to do. You must know the operations manual inside out, and you must be able to locate information. It always is instantly apparent to me when I observe a flight deck, when the annual technical questionnaire comes about. Because the crew members that don't know the operations manual very well fill the flight deck with all of the operations manual. The manual's absolutely bloody everywhere. The guys that do know the operations manual will go through the annual technical questionnaire and tick off the items that are in the flying manual, tick off the items that were in flying crew orders, tick off the items in the appendices in the load and balance manual, and so on and so forth, and they get, funny enough, one manual out at a time. And yet, sure enough, there'll be 2 or 3 questions at the end that are really hard to find and will need searching for. But it's that sort of approach that you should have, in my view, as you approach your command, i.e. to know where everything is and to know what it says. Not what you think it says or what you think it should say, but what it does say. What it does say, and similarly what it doesn't. Your authority comes from the board of British Airways. Your responsibility, in my professional opinion, is quite awesome. And it seems to me absolutely self-evident that it is your primary goal in life, to operate in accordance with British Airways standard operating procedures. Start, finish. I would be distraught if you could put a cigarette paper between the operation that I exhibit, work to, in any part of my flying career, whether it's a route check, whether it's line flying, line training, training the simulator, doing anything, because I do my utmost to operate in accordance with the operations manual. And I tell my crew that's what I'm doing. Of course, I'm a human being and I get it wrong. I forget things. It's a 53-year-old cracked disc up here after all. But my intention when I get up in the morning, when I go to bed at night, is to operate British Airways aircraft in accordance with the operations manual, both in the spirit and in the word. And I believe that that is the, if you like, my protection, my insurance policy. Because if I'm doing my level best, even if I get it wrong, I'm beyond criticism. Okay, well, during a session on a command day, I take time out to review that part of the operations manual which describes your responsibilities as commander. And we generally go through the paragraphs of section 24 as it is now, paragraph by paragraph, and have a debate about what it is that British Airways wants us to do in this regard. Now, in this sort of environment, that isn't going to be terribly constructive. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to turn me off and to read section 24, or that part of the operations manual if it changes, that refers to the captain's responsibilities. Because within that, I think, we can then draw out one or two items that you will be able to identify with. So then, having read this section, we're going to agree that your authority as commander comes by virtue of the law of the land, your licence, and indeed, because of British Airways aircraft, you're flying through the board of British Airways and is described in the standard operating procedures of British Airways. So it is very important that we establish under what circumstances you can deviate from standard operating procedures. And the operations manual provides for this in two ways. One, you may deviate from the operations manual for urgent and compelling reasons. Urgent and compelling reasons. In the interest of safety. So, there are occasions, there have been many occasions in my career when I have deviated from standard operating procedures. But they have been for urgent and compelling reasons, not because Colin thought it was a good thing to do, or because I was taking a shortcut, or whatever. And there'll be urgent and compelling reasons why you need to deviate from standard operating procedures. And if you do need to do so, and there are urgent and compelling reasons, then that's fine. That's fine. And the other reason, you may elect to use non-standard procedures to meet unexpected or unusual circumstances. In other words, Commander, we expect you to use your intelligence in the interests of safety and in the commercial interests of British Airways. As always, one goes before the other. We're paying you to be a commander, not a robot. Therefore, and as always is the case, simple decisions are easy. You know, we can do this or we can do that. Black and white, no problem. It's always the problems that are shades of grey, that are difficult. And that is what we're paying you for. On those occasions when you are presented with unexpected or unusual circumstances, you may have to vary British Airways standard operating procedures. How do we do this? And know, if you like, we'll have the comfort that what we have done is right. Well, when asked this, I sort of thought about it and said, well, look, if I could stand in front of the chairman of the board and explained the reasons behind the decision that I had taken to vary standard operating procedures, which were in the interests of safety, first, or secondly, in the commercial interests of British Airways, which were taken genuinely with the information that I had available at the time. And I don't have any problem at all in varying those procedures. But I sure as hell am not going to do it casually. And I'm sure as hell not going to do it without thinking through and discussing with my colleagues, those colleagues that are appropriate to discuss it with, if you like. Because my responsibility as a commander in British Airways is, as we have discovered in the operations manual, operations of aeroplane are complex. Sometimes it doesn't go to plan. Sometimes, yeah, urgent and compelling reasons happen. Okay, that's why I'm the commander. We will do it. We will do it this way for urgent and compelling reasons, and I will answer to it. We have something really unusual and it's a shade of grey, and I've got to make a decision to do this or that. Well, I'll do my utmost to make the best possible decision that I can, and then I will defend it to all comers, because that's what I'm paid to do. Now, well, with the benefit of hindsight, I might say, oh, I wish I'd have done something else. Oh, I wish I hadn't done that. We live in the here and now. We live at 500 knots. What's happened before may affect what's happened in the future, but I can't change that. Whatever that is that's affecting the future, I've now got to deal with. And that may mean a face-to-face discussion with the boss. Well, so be it. So be it. But I genuinely believe, Commander, that you can never walk away from making a decision, because that's what we pay you to do. And if you approach the decision-making process in a responsible and professional way, and trying to bring to your decision-making all of the information that is available that you can, that will improve the quality of that decision, then I don't think it is reasonable. I don't think it is reasonable that you can be criticised. Okay. Another subject dear to my heart is that of leadership. And of course, in British Airways, in your career, there isn't much formal training on the subject of leadership. You're, I suppose, supposed to get it or learn about it by a process of osmosis. Now, that isn't disparaging, because I used to use the example of, we've got some 747-400 captains who could take 400 people to the wrong place a day late and get 400 letters of commendation. And we've got other 747 captains who could take 400 people to the right place on schedule and get 400 letters of complaint. Now you know that that's a gross exaggeration, but it illustrates something that you can identify with. And the real issue about good leaders is good leaders will be followed. Bad leaders will be obeyed, perhaps. Along the way, and life generally, but in particular in your aviation career, if you log mentally those sorts of occasions when things have gone really well, you've flown with a really good captain who has commanded the aircraft or the operation in a particularly good way, either because something went wrong or because it was just a really good operation. Sometimes operations go really well because of that aspect of leadership that the commander gives. Back to our swans serenely swimming against the current, because of all that legwork underneath. And sometimes it goes well because something has gone wrong, something is unusual, and the commander has demonstrated leadership, which you can say, that was interesting. These are traits which I believe you can log and model. And equally, you can log, but hopefully not model, those sorts of behaviours and occasions where the captain has exhibited poor leadership. I use examples. Of course I use examples. An example of good leadership would be, in my view, we have a delay on the ground. So, a protracted delay on the ground. So, what I will do is I will get out of my seat, give my co-pilot control of the aircraft, and I will go into each cabin, be dressed and spurred, and I will speak as loudly as I can to that cabin to explain what is wrong, what is happening, and what I'm doing about it. Now, of course, they can hear me in first class, they can hear me in the sections of the club. In economy, they can probably only hear me round about and see me from the back. But what have I done? By that simple process, I've taken the sting out of the delay from the cabin crew. Because the passengers are afraid to confront me or give me a hard time, because they still rely on me as captain to take them flying. But they can give the cabin crew hell. And that simple exercise, if you do it, you'll get wonderful feedback from the cabin crew. Thanks so much, Captain, for coming down. Made such a difference. And what did it cost me? A few moments of my time, which otherwise I could have used reading the paper. If there's a delay on the ground, London, what I will do is I'll go up the walkway, I'll go into getting access to the check-in desk there, not the check-in desk, but the final desk prior to the walkway, and I'll say, what have you said? And they'll say whatever they've said. I will then make an announcement to those passengers on the 285. I'm the captain, my name's Colin Singh, and I thought you'd want to hear from me what the problem is. Tell them. Because milling around the gate will be a proportion, quite a large proportion, of the passengers who are coming with me. What have I done? I've taken the sting out of the problem from the ground staff. What did it cost me? Nothing. Baggage delay, baggage offload. Get out of the seat, you have control, go downstairs, empathise with the baggage control. Oh God, this must be the second time today. You poor chaps, funnily enough, the bags come off like that. You can make a difference, Commander, by showing leadership. You can have no effect whatever on your operation if you sit in your flight deck and just complain about things. Oh God, not again. Oh, bloody offload, that's the loading staff, screwed up again, or whatever. It's up to you. If you show leadership, the crew will follow you. If you don't, they won't. They might obey you, but they won't follow you. I've always taken the view that looking after my crew includes doing my utmost to carry their loved ones or partners or whatever, children, on their flight when they are accompanying them on a trip. I'll do my utmost to carry them. It's different from people on standby generally. Obviously I will always fill every seat that I can on the airplane. That's the way I believe we should operate. But my crew, in terms of jump seats, come first. And on one such occasion, we had a problem out of Singapore, and I did what I always do. I asked my colleague to get the airplane ready for service whilst I went and sorted it out, and went and tried to exercise my charm on Singapore, which is always a challenge. And we together worked through the fact we could do a male-female split on our crew. We could do some work with bags and one thing and another, and I made 100 kilos. I think it was for the CSD's wife, but it doesn't matter who it was, to go flying to Sydney or Melbourne, wherever. Anyway, As luck would have it, coming out of Melbourne, we had a protracted delay, and it was before passengers came on, and we were milling around the flight deck, and I just happened to be walking down past first class to overhear the CSD saying, "I don't care what the delay is, we are not going to let this captain down." And what fantastic feedback for something that I think was part of my job anyway. You can choose to do what you like. You really can, because it's your operation. Your operation. You're the commander when we give you that 4th gold bar, platinum bar, whatever it is. Good leaders are followed. Poor leaders are obeyed. Now, I have a very, very strong view that the vast majority of the so-called loss of status of British Airways commanders can be put directly at the feet of those of our colleagues who consistently let us down. I'm horrified when somebody who's paid 100,000 a year or whatever goes and thumps the desk of a clerk who's earning 20 because his SECV for £3.20 hasn't been paid. And we do have characters like that. We have people who will give training admin a hard time when it's actually the training manager who should be getting a hard time. We have people who will give scheduling a hard time when in fact scheduling are just doing their job. Yeah, we all have bad days. Yeah, we can always all get up in a bad mood. And I'm no different to anybody else. But you can choose behaviour. You can choose behaviour. And that behaviour will reflect well or badly on your command. One of the things that I have always said to training captains, trainee training captains and trainee training first officers is something along the lines that if ever you hear about yourself in the bar, for Christ's sake, do something about it. And what do I mean by that? I mean that there are 100 ways that the crews that you fly with will give you feedback. You can either be deaf to it, or you can be live to it and do something about it. None of us is perfect. We all make mistakes. We all have regrets. But things about the past we can't change. Things about the future we can. If we emulate good leaders, if when we look at what we have done, if we're honest with ourselves, and we're looking at ourselves in the mirror about what went wrong and why it went wrong, then we might be able to choose a different behaviour in the future that would make the same circumstances things go right. So I hope by now you've got the feeling that I believe that what a captain does day to day really matters. It really matters. You see, status doesn't come with the 4 bars. It doesn't come with the uniform. Status is earned. It's not given. Respect is earned, not given. And those of you who become good leaders as commanders, as part of your command, will always carry respect, the respect of your crew and the respect of British Airways. And as a human being, there's nothing better than having the respect of others. Now, one of the things that is lost to many people in British Airways is the fact that because there are so many captains, and because it sometimes seems as though we are only a number, we've lost sight of the fact that you carry all this authority and responsibility. And as a consequence, sometimes you lose sight of, as a commander, the effect that you can have on the operation, positively and negatively. As I've said, the loss of status can be put at the feet of the colleagues of ours that have let us down, and equally the way in which the rest of our colleagues in British Airways think about us is often down to those same people. I used to say, well, for every one of our colleagues that lets us down, we need at least 12 to do something special to create the balance. And that's a sad fact of life, but it's a fact of life in British Airways. If you were working for a smaller outfit, or indeed an outfit based overseas, that may not be the case. But we have to live with what we've got. What you do as a commander matters every day. Contrast the captain who goes to find the cabin crew in their briefing room, or who speaks to and addresses the cabin crew on the bus, with somebody who doesn't and just climbs on the bus and says nothing. We've got people like that. Imagine the difference then of what the little girl, the most junior stewardess, feels about that, let alone the most senior. So, if you are prepared to accept that you have this responsibility and the authority that goes with it, then it seems to me that you might concur that if something is worth fixing, you should take the personal responsibility to fix it. You can take another view, you can just whinge about it. But of course, whinging achieves nothing, changes nothing, it just makes the perception of the problem worse. When I was Chief Pilot Highlands Division, I used to say to the guys, don't write voyage reports to me. One, I haven't got time to read them, and two, when I do get around to reading them, then the trail will be cold, or it will be 2 weeks later, and the event will be past. If it's worth doing, fix it. Now, I used to put a caution on that. I said I'd rather you gave me 24 hours notice if you're going to cause an industrial action, a strike or whatever. But the result was that the guys were able to assess for themselves what was important and do something about it, and help them in realising the things that weren't important, that were just life. Life in aviation. Shit happens. Okay? And just deal with it in that way. So, what does that mean? It means when I arrive on Terminal 4 and there are no steps and it takes forever and I've got to apologise to the passengers for, although I got them there on time, it's now taking 30 minutes to get steps and so on and so forth. I don't take it out on the company. I don't take it out on the girl or the man who's on the end of whatever we call Terminal 4 control now. Heathrow Central. When I get off the aeroplane and when it's all quiet, I get on the phone and I ring the duty Terminal 4 manager and I say, "Hi, my name's Colin Seaman. I was the skipper of the 286 inbound. Did you know that it took 30 minutes for steps to arrive this morning?" And he'll say one of two things. One, no, I didn't know, and I'm going to find out why. Satisfaction or win. Okay. Two, that, yeah, I'm terribly sorry, Captain, because that's how I say it. But we were 15 shift drivers short this morning, and unfortunately we just weren't able to get the appropriate driver to the right place. Okay, well, we haven't achieved anything in that, but at least I know why there was a problem, and that probably makes me feel better. But what I never do, ever, is raise my voice or get sharp with anybody in these circumstances, because it does absolutely no good and it brings disrepute onto me and therefore my colleagues. So it's a question of sharing that information with the right person so that hopefully over time, even in something as big as British Airways, with the inertia that it has, things will get better. It's very, very easy to say, "Oh, this has happened to me the 7th time and I'm not going to do anything about it. Fuck it, I'll just go home." Well, you can take that view, but if you do take that view, then ultimately, if it's the same view as so many of your colleagues, then nothing will change. Nothing will ever get better. For you remaining in British Airways, Terminal 5 is going to happen. Terminal 5 is a huge opportunity for British Airways to put right so many of the wrongs that we see around Heathrow day to day. If the right information is provided to the right people, packaged in the right way, then funnily enough, things happen, things change. And your input to that, as a commander, as a responsible commander, is invaluable. But if you're going to chew someone's ear off because that's going to make you feel better, well, actually, you make things worse. And that is a choice behaviour that you have to take. Whinging fixes nothing, just makes the perception of things worse. If it's worth fixing, take the personal responsibility to fix it. If you see something even as minor as a typo in the ops manual, it'll take 2 minutes to go online and send your flight manager an email, and he'll put it in the package for the amendment cycle. If there's something confusing in the operations manual, again, a quick email to the right person will get fixed. Bit missing on an aerodrome plate, send it to Flight Technical Dispatch and they'll send it on to AirAd. It'll get picked up in the next amendment cycle. Those sorts of things are very easy to do. And over time, they have an effect. They really do. They really do.